The House passed a sweeping 2-year budget and debt limit deal Thursday before lawmakers left Washington to begin their 6-week summer recess. The deal raises federal spending levels, lifts the debt limit for 2 years, and prevents automatic spending cuts to military and domestic funding. It now heads to the Senate, where it's expected to pass and ultimately end up on the president's desk next week. Under President Trump, federal debt has surged to $22 trillion. And the annual deficit is expected to reach $1 trillion this fiscal year. This is a Republican Party that has been about the deficit under Speaker Ryan, yet now it's embracing a bipartisan spending package, a debt limit package. Why put all those principles from the past in the rearview mirror?
I think part of this is a change in mindset, and it's not just in the Republican Party. It's among Democrats as well, and it's actually not even just in the political class. It's, I think, somewhat in the academic world as well. There is this evolving belief or conviction that debt and deficits are not as threatening, as damaging as, say, people thought they were a decade ago. If you remember the way Bob Rubin came in as Bill Clinton's top financial, before Treasury Secretary, head of the Council of Economic Advisors, and sort of drummed into him the idea that we have to get this under control. It's an overhang that'll, destroy our children's future. That thinking has completely disappeared in today's Washington.
Was the economy driving this decision inside of the White House? They didn't want to rattle the markets?
Absolutely. I think this president, the way he loves polls, he loves the stock market. That's his measure of success. And it may be a false measure in terms of the underlying economy and what we're going to face with entitlements and deficits down the road. But if that's what he's looking at, he knew that default on the U.S. debt, not doing a debt ceiling raise, would have been fatal to his economic hopes and re-election.
But what was remarkable, too, though, he put out a tweet that day calling on the House Republicans to get behind this bill, and overwhelmingly, House Republicans revolted and voted against it. Now, many were not speaking up against it, and this was a bipartisan deal that was cut. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, supports it. It will pass the Senate with Republican support, but the Republicans are not comfortable with this, but they're scared to speak out, too. Ted Cruz, who led the charge against leading a debt ceiling increase during the Obama years, I asked him, are you comfortable with raising the debt ceiling for 2 years, suspending it for 2 years? He said he didn't want to comment when I asked him about it initially, and it just goes to show you it's just totally different under the Republican president.
It was a big defeat for Mick Mulvaney, who did not want this, and a big success for Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary.
And we saw new economic data on Friday. The GDP rose at a 2.1% rate for the second quarter. That's a pullback from the 3.1% in the first quarter of this year. That's according to the Commerce Department. You've been on Capitol Hill as a reporter for years. The Republican Party, with the president on this economy, regardless of his lack of interest in deficits, perhaps?
Yeah, I did a stint on the Hill. I arrived in 2011 during what people might remember was this really sort of almost frightening moment where they almost didn't raise the debt ceiling. And I was there through 2013. And my entire tenure was this story of the perpetual fight over the Boehner rule, where they agreed that they would not raise the debt ceiling more than $1 for every $1 of spending cuts. And to watch that just entirely get wiped away is just, in a few short years, it's just amazing to watch.
Yeah, that propelled the House Republican majority back in the 2010 midterms. It was that issue, and they ran and they fought the Obama administration tooth and nail, but there's no talk about deficits and debt in Washington.
Final thought on the new economic numbers?
Well, it deprives President Trump of a big talking point, which is 3% growth. And the number was disappointing. That said, it doesn't seem that it's a real warning that we're headed into a sharp slowdown. But, it is an indication that President Trump can't count on a gangbusters economy into his reelection, which I think a few weeks ago people thought maybe he could.
And he, of course, is keeping up his drumbeat of pressure, incredible, unprecedented pressure, against Jay Powell at the Federal Reserve.
To try to keep those interest rates low.
Exactly.
Will Republicans break in the House on this budget deal? The Freedom Caucus?
In the Senate, in the House, they've, most of them already voted against.
They already voted against.
Yeah, but in the Senate, I think you'll see half the Senate Republican Conference eventually vote for it. Maybe a little bit more than half, maybe about half of the Democrats ultimately back it. It's not an easy vote for Democrats, too, because you punt the issue of the debt ceiling essentially into if there's a Democratic president, all of a sudden they got to deal with it right off the bat in a new presidency. And how will the Republicans deal with it then? It probably won't give it to him or her that easily.